Computer. All right, good afternoon, good morning, everybody. Good, very early morning to some people, and welcome. We are this fine August day, we're going to talk about food inflammation and chronic disease. And I think I've talked about this before, but it doesn't hurt to talk about these things again and make them very, very interactive so that everyone has a good handle on what is inflammatory foods, which are the chronic diseases, and how foods can so dramatically affect the course of your chronic disease. And I have a story, and you can tell me your stories too. I had very bad asthma from getting gas, from getting smoked out in Malaysia. And what saved me really was diet, a huge change in diet, eating more raw food, eating more fats, and doing the exact opposite of what the US Food and Drug Administration tells you, or what the USDA tells you, what the food pyramid tells you. And I have never looked back, and my family's health has been excellent because of the food that we eat. And so you gotta think of food as medicine, and we can walk through our room and see what everyone else thinks about food and how, in some cases, food has helped them with their illness, chronic illness, or their acute, chronic injury, whatever. Do we want to go around the room and say something, or should I move on?
Suggest moving on.
Okay. And so people will tell you medicines, supplements, my kids love to tease me and look at supplements and say, oh, I'm going to use this supplement for this and that. Supplements do not work. Food is the supplement packaged in a very complex package, and that's the only way your body understands food. And that is something to keep in mind at all times, every time you reach for a shortcut. Every time you say, oh, I'm C deficient, or I didn't go out in the sun, let me get some vitamin D. You have to let your food literally be your medicine. And the most important thing, more than anything else, regardless of whether you eat good food or bad, bad food is really bad these days because it's poisoned in many cases. But what do you do by way of medicine? And what I want to say is all medicine, regardless of what kind of medicine you take, whether it's an aspirin, something as benign as an aspirin, or something as terrible as chemotherapy, will do more harm than good. So primum non nocere is a very important principle to keep in mind when your doctor tells you, hey, take a Benadryl, hey, take an ibuprofen or Advil or whatever it is. Those pills and drugs do much more harm than good for chronic inflammatory disease. We come to the diet that is puritanical, that is posited by our agricultural department, by the USDA, by the FDA as the correct diet. This is a virtuous, very low fat, very low salt, high fiber diet that tastes terrible, that's approved by every dietitian in the United States. It has primarily oils as a fat. It has a little bit of fish, fat-free fish largely. It has a tiny bit of cheese, a tiny bit of salt, and mostly fruits, a lot of grains and cereals, which all add up to being carbs, and very little of what I would call as nutrient-dense foods. So what you don't want, if you want to dodge disease, or if you want to heal from disease, is this puritanical diet. And they'll often serve this, although they don't even serve this in hospitals. They serve canned stuff. A lot of it is canned. So it's far worse than this. But this will make you just as sick. This will make you just as sick. Doctors tell you if you eat more fiber, you'll poop better. I'm here to say that's not the case. If you eat a lot of fats, you will have better bowel movements. It is the quality, it's the nutrient density of your food that'll determine how your digestion works. I know too many women who've gone on low-fat diets who ended up having gallbladder surgery, ended up becoming very, very overweight, ended up having super high cholesterol levels because they didn't have enough fats, ironically. And then when you have eaten these puritanical foods, right? At night, what do people eat? People eat these pornographic foods, which are laden with, high fructose corn syrup and all sorts of hydrogenated fats. And you guys don't eat any of that. But we're going to talk about the 11 principles of making food your medicine. And these are the Weston Price organization's principles of what sort of foods to eat. And we're going to talk a little bit about what all of this means. In fact, why don't you talk about it and tell me what you think about what is a no refined food? What does no refined foods mean? Anyone take a guess?
It's eating foods that are not adulterated, processed, or otherwise dealt with, other than picking them or from the ground or from a tree.
Yeah, pretty much picked. Yeah.
From an animal and so on.
If God made it and if a man made it, it's not.
There you go. If God made it, it's okay. If man made it, never mind. It's got to be picked or pulled or hunted or fished or dried, but never processed at 1500 degrees in temperature or 1500 psi in pressure or extruded. By the time you do that, by the time you eat these protein powders that a lot of senior citizens, a lot of ball players, etc., or bodybuilders are eating, you are making room for brain tumors and serious disease. So that's no refined foods. Nutrient density, buck for buck, for calorie, what is a cheaper, what's a better deal? You might think at a buck an oyster is very expensive, but a large oyster has the same nutrient density as a pound of beef, ground beef. And so when you eat things that contain all the factors you need, whether it's enzymes or minerals or proteins or fats, you need less of that food. And so it becomes cheaper actually to eat nutrient dense foods.
A question about quantity. I have been eating raw oysters that have been pre-shucked, I think I mentioned before. The question is, I know that if you eat one of them, it replaces or is equal to, say, a pound of ground beef, as you mentioned. What happens if I eat 2 or 3?
It's food. It's food. You can eat a dozen and nothing will happen. Your body will thank you for it. It will store all the excess stuff that it can, all the extra vitamins, and it'll get rid of the things it doesn't need. But it's a very nutrient dense food and it'll satisfy you.
Is there anything I should take with it? I mean, should I increase fats at the same time, or is that not appropriate?
Oysters have fat, a fair amount of fat. And so maybe lemony things, a vinaigrette with shallots, a little sour vinaigrette with shallots or lemon juice is great with oysters.
Got it. Thank you.
Try not to smoke it, boil it, steam it. I know it's a bit of extra work, especially if you're shucking it yourself, but it's worth it to eat them raw. They're so delicious and so nutritious.
Great.
The third precept, and this is where there's ticking. There's a lot of disagreement about this. Every diet contains some animal food. There were no vegans. There will never be vegans who will survive to tell the tale. Every culture in the world has some animal food. They may not eat it every day. They may not eat it even every 2 weeks. It may be so scarce and so sacred that they save it for their pregnant women or their athletes or their growing children. Every culture and every civilization, the diet contains some animal food. So if someone tries to sell you or your daughter or your granddaughter or the youngsters in your family veganism as a way of life, I assure you, it'll affect their fertility, it'll affect their moods. They'll be much more prone to drugging themselves up from paranoia, from being more fearful. They will not have as much mental stability as people who eat animal food. They will not have as much endurance against disease. They won't have as much stamina. In the early going, good things might happen, but in the long term, every diet contains animal food. And the sad thing is, in a lot of these books, there's a lot of very good advice mixed up with don't eat animal foods. There's advice on exercise. There's advice on, eat some fresh vegetables and salads and this and that. And they ruin it all by saying don't eat animal food. Try and eat raw animal food, raw butter, raw milk. If you're a vegetarian, you can eat eggs, you can eat butter, you can eat cream, raw milk, and try and eat it raw. Some raw animal food is consumed raw in every culture. Can you please name animal foods that are consumed raw in various cultures? We have so many cultures on board today. Go for it.
Liver.
What?
Fish.
Liver.
Liver, yep. Raw liver, fish, yeah, raw beef.
Lamb.
Yeah, raw lamb, yeah.
Mm.
Raw oysters,
Oysters.
eggs. Yeah, you can eat raw eggs. Raw salmon. Are there any specific dishes? Fermented raw meats, salamis, prosciuttos, fermented fish, the Gelta fish, the Scandinavians eat the stinky fish that is super nutritious.
What's say that fish name again?
Gefilte fish, I think it's
Oh,
called.
gefilte fish. Okay.
Yeah. And there's another even stinkier dish that they make, which is a great delicacy and reserved for special occasions. What do raw animal foods contain, do you think?
All the enzymes.
Oh, yeah. They contain enzymes that prevent a run on your digestive enzymes. You'll find that if you have digestive issues, you will digest raw foods better because they come packaged with the lipases and proteases and amylases that are necessary to digest that food.
Did anyone see the Del Bigtree presentation yesterday about the man who was told he would definitely not live beyond 30? And he discovered raw foods and he completely healed himself, and he's 45 years old now and he eats mainly raw foods.
Mainly raw. Yep. I have seen raw eating people look about 20 years younger than their ages. The sad part is I love some cooked foods, but if I were to go to raw foods and you were to go to raw foods, your skin would look like pearls.
A question about raw food combined or eaten at the same time as cooked foods. Does one have an effect on the other?
The cooked food, all the enzymes are dead. The enzymes in the raw food will help you digest the cooked food better.
Thanks.
Always accompany cooked food with some raw food, whether it's sauerkraut, whether it's yogurt, or anything that has enzymes, ferments to help you digest the cooked food. But one of the advantages of cooked food, very cooked food, is the amino acids kind of fall apart. And, like a chicken stock that's cooked for a while, the amino acids fall apart and they are easier to digest in that sense. But, if you eat the same thing raw, there's nothing like it. Nothing like it. Frequently, if you go hiking, just take a piece of fatty cured meat and just slice off bits of it and eat that every day. That essentially is pemmican that the American Indians used when they traveled long distances. They would mix it up with tallow, which doesn't melt. Maria, tallow doesn't melt in high heat, my darling. And so, or other animal fats that were saturated, and they would carry a pound of this stuff, and they didn't have to carry oodles and oodles of carbohydrate foods. They could subsist on this and walk and carry heavy weights for many miles. Eskimo dogs, if they're fed raw fermented foods, they can go for 12 hours without food, and they hit a wall within 2 or 3 hours if they're fed cooked food. All food, all historical, traditional, ancient foods, that were passed on from grandma to grandchild to mother and child, had high levels of enzymes and very beneficial bacteria. So you want to eat foods that have high levels of enzymes. Your cultures, can you think of foods that are fermented from your separate different cultures that you have eaten or love? Go around the room.
I know my dad liked to eat the pickled, hot pickled, like pepperoncinis and
Oh, yes.
that right out of the jar, growing up. That was a big thing of his.
Oh, yes. The best digestive. Oh, that's so good for you. So good for you too. Eat whatever your dad ate, okay? Because he is on track. That man knows what he's doing. That's for sure. All grains were soaked, sprouted, leavened, fermented. Please do it. If you make your bread, leaven it for a few days before you make it and bake it. Get sourdough bread. Don't get the 3-hour rice bread. That'll destroy your gut. That'll give people celiac. Not good, not good. Breads that have been fermented for a month, celiacs can eat. People with autism can eat them without a problem.
The question about the quality of raw food, what I've read and I guess studied, is the idea that the soils in which most foods are grown, raw or others, are much less capable of providing good nutrients. Speak from, say, 20, 30, 50, or 100 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Does that mean that we not going to supplements, but what would be approach to, getting more of whatever is missing?
Yes. So frequently that's an excuse for people to eat supplements. I don't consider that to be an excuse because I think there's enough very high quality food around where you do not have to resort to supplements. There's enough well-managed soil. There's enough ability to combine foods from the sea, the ground, the mountains that'll give you the kinds of nutritive value that you need.
Thanks.
I'm going to run back to what we ate growing up, family traditions. We had the herring all the time. My mom was from Germany, so we had the regular and in the cream too. So that was one, and of course sauerkraut was big. And and now in Hawaii, I know traditionally people ate poi, which was a fermented food.
Right. Very good, Claudia.
I remember growing up and eating or being offered yogurt. And because I didn't eat it regularly, I thought it had a strange taste and was coaxed, I think, by my mother to eat it. And then after a while, actually many, many years later, I decided I really did like it and it was really satisfying. But at first it wasn't.
So I just to add to Claudia, I'm glad she added the poi, the Hawaiian poi, because we do, sour it, does turn sour, and we actually prefer it sour. We call it sour. And of course, in Hawaii, we have a lot of very popular here would be the Korean kimchi's, all of the kimchi they make, and it's quite popular. And Japanese is the natto, which is the fermented soybeans that I don't really care for, but I'm better learn to eat it. I think that, I think there are other Japanese types of fermented foods. I'm gonna go find that out for you and give you back some dishes.
Ideas. Oh yeah. Bring back ideas, guys. Bring back ideas.
Yeah, and now we have in Hawaii different Polynesians that come here, the Samoans, the Fijians, Tongans, and all these Polynesian cousins that are here, the Maoris from New Zealand or Aotearoa. So I'll find out because it's quite interesting to know and learn the different types of fermented foods. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah. And Claudia, you're the queen of fermentation. Do you have anything to say about?
Well, I could talk for hours on it. I did do a presentation, I think you saw on my Facebook page for our little church group. And, you know, traditionally everything that, you know, was salted in one way or another ended up being a fermentation. So many of the wars fought over eons of time were over the ability to ferment anything and everything they had in their environment. So over here, because there's quite hot climate, I make jun, which is the honey form of kombucha. And we have a lot of honey on this island too. So it's easy to do all that. But I mean, I could go on for hours about all the lists of all chocolate is fermented food. Yeah. So anyway, I'll let it get back to everybody else.
Okay. Anyone else got anything to say? Alice, you have made the most amazing kvass. Do you want to comment on your kvass? Are you still making it or no?
Hi.
Hi.
I make it periodically, yes. And yes, and you know, I do things. I just thought this was interesting because inflammation and all that. So thank you so much.
Okay. All right. All right. So we've talked about fermentation and its importance, and the reason you need fermented foods, guys, is most of your neurotransmitters are made in your gut by your bacteria, your gut bacteria. If you ate one round of antibiotics, a lot of people have been driven psychotic by it, suicidal by it, depressed by it. So pay heed to the beings that live in your gut and encourage them to encourage the growth of a wonderful garden in your belly. And all the fermentation, the leavening, the sprouting, the soaking will help with all of that. Major cultures in the world, 30 to 80% calories from fat and very few from polyunsaturated fats, very, very few calories from. And what we're doing today is we're eating primarily seed oils, which are very high in polyunsaturated fats. They will kill you. They will cause inflammation, acute as well as chronic. They will cause heart disease. So what we're doing is we're tarring all fats with the same brush. We're saying fats are bad. No, 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 no. Natural fats that God made and we render in a very unprocessed way are very, very good for us. Fats protect all our organs. If we're doing marathons, we can live on fats without taking a break. Fats protect our skin. Fats allow us to make the cholesterol to fight cancer and other diseases. You find a lot of cancer in people who don't eat enough fats, surprisingly. They got to be good fats, however, because fats is where your pesticides accumulate, all your fat-soluble rat poisons and other things accumulate. They are deadly if they're bad quality fats. So if you seek out fats, please seek out good fats. And we have so many markets around to enable us to do that. Ancient cultures, traditional wisdom, nearly equal amounts of omega-3 and omega-6 fats. And these are the fats with one double bond versus two double bonds. Omega-6s are the two double bond fats. Every time you have more double bonds, the fat is more unstable. It is more liquid.
It's 11 o'clock.
And so you want to eat saturated fats. Don't be afraid of saturated fats. And you definitely want to cook in saturated fats to avoid inflammation. All diets, without exception, contain some salt, whether it was urine, milk, blood, meat, ash, burnt stuff. And people traveled great distances to exchange salt with the coastal people from the mountains, because it gave them goiter, not eating enough salt, not eating enough of the minerals of the ocean. And use your bones. Nothing should go wasted. If you buy a pound of some good quality stuff, whether it's a vegetable or a meat or a bone, you should be able to utilize every single part of it, down to the bone, down to composting that bone until it's soft and it goes into your garden or into your plant.
Sushma, I know you've talked about this before, but could you say a few words about using coconut oil?
Coconut oil is an excellent oil, which is largely saturated. It has some and largely small chain, low chain fatty acids, 12 and under fatty acids, which are digested somewhat differently than the other fats. because these are short chain. So they actually get digested through your chylomicrons, so through a different system, and they're much easier to turn into energy. So people who eat coconut oil just thrive. They have beautiful complexions. Their digestion is wonderful. They tend to get less disease. Coconut oil is antifungal, antiviral. What that fat does is it gums up the reproductive envelopes of viruses and bacteria so that they cannot reproduce, so that they cannot harm you. It protects your body from those influences. It protects your body from EMF, all saturated fats. In this time of 5G, folks, you're not going to get a 5G. Yes, we're protesting and this and that. The key is to be prepared with your food. And the key food here is fats. I keep telling my next door neighbor who is very EMF sensitive to eat more saturated fats, but she's very afraid. People are very afraid to eat saturated fats, but that will take away your sensitivity, greatly alleviate your sensitivity to electrical and electrical radiation, magnetic radiation, EMF, etc.
I know that you've talked about fermented cod liver oil can be applied directly to the belly instead of taking it internally. Can things like coconut oil, and I know there are different things, can that be used or absorbed in the same way?
Absolutely, liberally. Take a half cup of coconut oil and slather yourself with it and hang out in the sun or go to sleep with coconut oil. It is wonderful. It is wonderful.
Thanks.
And use your bones. Use your bones. Don't waste them. Don't toss them. And one of the very most important principles we've lost sight of is provisions for future generations. We have abdicated so much of our grandmother's role to pediatricians. We are relying on these consultants to tell us what is good for our children, our families, our future generations. And you know what they are? They're consultants. They're going to tell you what is good for their pocketbook, whether it's drugs, chemo, radiation, vaccinations, supplements, other things that are not food, that are not grown by our farmers. And it behooves us to train our young. Many people I know have not trained. They fed their children really good, but then they failed to train them on why they were doing it. And the children rebelled against them as teenagers and went back to fast food and destroyed their health and their children's health. And so it's like you don't want the cycle to repeat itself. There's things that you need to pass on from one generation to the next. Can you talk about things you've passed on or tried to pass on? Maybe you get slapped in the face. Okay, you do, you will. Tell me what you have done for your future generations. Anyone? Kai.
I can pipe in. My son has become an avid fermenter. Yay.
Yay. Awesome. Awesome, Claudia. Who else?
I've been preaching forever to my family, the younger generation, the current generation. There's 7 siblings in my family. I'm number 2. So I tend to preach everything that I've learned, regarding natural remedies, the right foods to eat. I've studied enzymes, so I'm pretty, hooked onto that and the science of enzymes, what they are. I still continue to study enzymes, and I use I'm on a therapy, so I got my family on it, and I've got my grandson, which is a different generation, to believe in enzymes and start looking into it. So it's preaching. I think whatever you do, and whatever you make a habit, that you develop a habit to a healthier lifestyle, no matter what that may be, you are the product, right? Mm-hmm. You are the product. So you're not just talking, but you're the example and the product of everything that you've done. So if they look at me, I'm 74 years old, and they go, and my grandson or anybody in the family, cousins, auntie, uncle, whatever, 74, you can't be. So then they open the conversation. So I am the product of the product. Awesome. I go around, looking the way I look, talking the way I talk. My other half got me this darn thing, and the other day Claudia knows this because we went up to Mauna Kea, which was a really good experience. Beautiful mountain here, over 13, the highest peak from sea level in the world. And so I come home and I'm logging over 16,000 steps. So he goes and looks at the chart from my age group, and he finds that over 16,000 steps in one day, which it logs daily. So he's blown away because I normally average over 10,000 steps just working around the house or the yard.
Yeah.
So he looked for my age group and he said, "You're unusual."
Be an example. Yeah.
So I'm the product of the product. So
All right.
they look at it, they see it, and they ask questions, and then I go into a preaching mode.
Awesome.
That's my training.
All right. That's Marlene, you're next.
Well, I serve the food. That I don't change what I eat because they come for dinner or whatever. I serve it, I expose them to it. If you go on a picnic, I, bring things and they just see, like she said, be a model. They can see that it's delicious. You can make raw food, anything delicious.
Oh, absolutely. And you are the best cook on earth. Anything Marlene
thank
makes
you.
is delicious. Yes.
Thank you.
How about hard topics, guys? Hard to discuss, like whether it's chemo or radiation or drugs. How do you convey your thought? You've seen much more damage than they have, the young generation. How do you convey that?
I know I've had a hard time with Kevin. He's got skin problems and things like that. And we do go to a naturopath, and he's finally listening to her about gluten in his life. And so, and I've been trying to tell him for 15 years, just take a break and see how your body. And so it's going to start in October that he will do a test and avoid certain things. And I'm glad for that. And I mean, I still remember when my mother was diagnosed celiac, she couldn't imagine that food was the enemy. So that was her hard problem. So I think for me, I just want to keep trying to be a good example, and I allow people to have their opinions, but I think I get a lot of flack.
Of course.
And so I just all you can do is try to be healthy for yourself sometimes.
True. Absolutely. Sunshine.
Oh, the best way is just to model it. Other people see you eating it, and they see you and they see what age you are and that you're not on any medications, and that's a testimony for testimonial. Yeah.
Renee, don't be quiet. Oh, Renee.
There we go. Yeah, I just do my crevasse, my cabbage things. I'm not too much, unfortunately. And I do have coconut fats, but I don't like coconut fat.
Do you like butter?
Oh, I like butter, yeah. And I have the butter.
Okay.
So that's it. And, I prefer I enjoy my beef because I grew up with it, but I enjoy it on the rare side. I don't like anything overcooked. So
nice.
And as far as radiation goes, I don't believe in it, but sometimes you don't have a choice.
Yes.
Yes. But you do have a choice on chemo. I don't like chemo, and Herb doesn't like chemo. So that's an improvement.
All right. Who do we
And if
have?
you're over 85 years of age, they won't give you chemo.
Oh yeah, good for them. Thank heavens. Alice, do you got anything to say? You want to unmute yourself, my dear? Or we go with land.
One of the things I've been reflecting on is that I share with my son and daughter things that come up as a part of my life. like reflecting on whether it's a way I eat or it's something that I use, and share that as subjects come up. And I used to want to wait for an acknowledgement. And I realized that I don't do that anymore. I just make sure that I've passed on the clear information that I have and just let it go.
Yeah.
And that's been it's a constant learning for me, because I think I have investment
Mhm.
in them adopting some of the things that I think are good or best or right.
Yes, yes. It is a good thing. We come from a generation of stoic parents and grandparents who don't talk about their ailments or what they did about their ailments. And sometimes, you know, it's a good thing to talk about it and say, hey, I was so very sick with this, and then I got so much better with this, you know. We try to shield our children from all that, from stuff they don't need to hear, but maybe that's not such a good idea.
Shalma, do you know anything about macadamia nut oil?
Oh, it's
Or-
wonderful, but I would eat the macadamia nuts because it is polyunsaturated oil. It's a long chain fatty acids, and you should eat them in the form of the nut rather than the oil. Always.
My
always.
brother has a macadamia nut grove.
Oh, that's
on
awesome.
Molokai, so we grew
Oh.
up eating it right from the
Lucky.
tree.
They're so wonderful. You
Oh, yeah.
lucky thing, you.
I'm lucky. I brought a big bag home I went there for a family function and I picked up all not all, but a lot of it from my mom's tree because they got tons over there. I don't know why. I don't know what the guy that originally brought it here from Australia that
Mhm.
originally planted it in the 18 da da da. And on my brother's homestead lot, it had about 56 trees. And then he started planting and planting. And now there's hundreds of trees, and my mom's yard, it just started with 2 or 3, and now it's got tons on her yard. So I brought a big bag home. I heard there was a report done, a study about the macadamia nut type of oil that was good for the heart.
Yes, yes, but be very aware that anything that's expelled out of a macadamia nut is not as good as eating the whole nut.
A whole nut, okay. Okay.
Because those are fragile, very fragile oils.
Okay, yeah. So that was one of the ones that I was thinking of. There's another one. When I remember it, I'll tell you. Another nut oil. It's our Hawaiian kukui nut, but the English name is candle. I think
candle
it's like
nut. Yes, I've heard of those. Yeah,
kukui nut.
yes, yes.
Yeah, because we used that in the old days when we didn't have electricity. We put it in a lantern,
Yes.
and we use that oil to ignite and create the light. So we call those little things kukui helepo. Lanterns, kukui helepo, because the kukui is the nut, and it's actually for the Hawaiian culture. It's a medicine for us. We've used it as a medicine in multiple ways. I'll give you the information later because it's quite interesting.
Wow,
And
yeah, please do, please do.
yeah, we eat the nut. They use it to massage. They use it for light.
Everything. Fuel, food and fuel. Yeah.
Yeah, everything.
All right. Thanks for that. Ellen Marie.
Hi.
Anything to add?
I'm always sharing information with people. Like, for example, when I got sick twice last winter, once in November and once in December, I nebulized hydrogen peroxide and healed myself within like 36 hours.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. And I would have normally, I have hashies, so I'm very vulnerable to sickness. And when I get sick, I can stay sick for a long time. And yeah. And so I, just started telling everybody my experience and trying to convince people that they don't, this was such a miracle cure. So, that is but just one small example of, people, I can get kind of preachy and kind of lecturing. I get a lot of eye rolls from my husband. And yeah, a lot of eye rolls.
As do we all. Yeah.
But yeah, so just like Sunshine said, and the other, Claudia, I think, by example, I have a friend that told me about this great chicken dish at Costco. She goes, oh, this is so good. You got to try it. And so I looked at it and the ingredients were just awful.
Mm-hmm.
And she's got Hashimoto's.
Mm-hmm.
And I called her and I said, Diane,
Mm-hmm.
honey bunny,
Mm-hmm.
you need to know what these ingredients mean to your brain and your body. And that you're eating toxins when you eat this stuff. I mean, I really tore into her.
Good for you. Good for
Hopefully
you.
in a nice way. But you know,
Yeah.
she's like a little sister. We've known each other for decades.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So but that's how I share.
Yeah. Thank you for that. And the reason I belabor this point is we have abdicated our innate wisdom to someone who tells us that we are wrong and randomized control studies are correct, anecdote, empirical evidence is incorrect. So I would encourage all of you to really look at what's worked for you, talk to others about it, and hear everyone else's experiences. That's how you spread the concept of food as medicine. And that's the only way to stay out of hospitals and doctors' offices.
I want to share one thing which helped me is hearing people's stories about their ancestors or their parents passing on information or products and so on. I was reflecting that my parents, as much as I'm aware, didn't pass on anything that was positive or helpful, except we had good food. And I think I grew up quite healthily, and I had lots of exercise and did a lot of that type of thing. But it was up to me when I became older, maybe as a post-teenager, to learn for myself, not from other people.
Yes.
Not necessarily my parents or that milieu from which I came, which didn't seem to either stress or even be aware of any of this. So I recognize other people's sources and find that's really positive. And maybe I've had to do a bit more on my own, and I'm still constantly learning, but it didn't come from the past, or maybe I didn't even know about my ancestors or my grandparents, how they ate or what they did. It wasn't even discussed or talked about. So it was almost like not quite a black hole, but it was unknown. And I realized that, and I keep learning that I have to develop for myself from not only researching or checking the lab, which is my own body, but for taking information and wisdom from people around me.
So true, so true. And we are a melting pot. Anyone who is an immigrant to America has come here and tried their best to forget their old country and tried to have their children eat McDonald's, dress like Americans, speak like Americans. And in doing so, some very valuable stuff has been lost. We've thrown the baby out with the bathwater in many. I see that in Indians who used homeopathy in India. And they come here and now they've got health insurance. And so they toss out their homeopathy pills and potions, and they think now they're getting the best medicine, only to learn something very different.
The same thing happening in reverse. Since I've been visiting Australia since '79, I've seen how they've adopted the American way of everything.
Oh no.
And same with Japan. There's certain, they think they put us on this pedestal and they think the burger and the fries and the whatever and the milkshake and the beer and the is the best. And so yeah, we've ruined other countries' health.
Along with us, we've dragged them down. Yes.
Yeah, we have, and I've seen it. I was like, oh, this is so sad. I wish you could have remained true to yourself. And it is sad that. So that's the thing. We need to. On all the other lessons, we need to stay true to ourselves, and that needs to be taught.
That needs to be taught. Yeah. Number 11 is probably one of the most important things that'll keep future generations sane and healthy. Yeah.
Shama, just to add to what you're saying about what you said and what the other lady said, Maria, I believe, about how it's going to McDonald's or how we changed and we're losing our culture and how we were taught. And just letting you know that I've worked for 37 years with the major dailies in Hawaii, the newspaper, and my field was marketing and sales. So I can tell you that I believe that it was a lot of marketing from the, corporations that produce the foods and they make the money. So they had a plan, and they had goals, and they needed to make the money and achieve their goals. And so I think that's what started happening. I think a lot of the marketing coming at us and believing in their beautiful pictures. And because if you look at the commercials, they show all these very young, vibrant, healthy people eating McDonald's and smiling and all that kind of stuff. So I believe that the part, it's not just what you had said, it's in addition to what you have said, and that is marketing by the very corporate rich food.
Very evil, yeah, for profit, motivated by profit, yeah.
So it's a battle, it's an uphill battle.
You gotta watch out, yeah, you gotta have your people, your family and your civilization watch out, so true. All righty, that was great. That was great.
I'd like to contribute a little positive thing along the lines of how things actually got better in my family. Oh boy, where do I start? Okay, my parents suffered greatly from starvation in World War II and post-World War II in Germany. And so when they, my dad is a doctor, and he told me, that American medicine is going to be in big trouble, and wants to be a doctor. They're letting go of the old ways that really worked for people. It kind of inspired me to be a nurse outside the hospital setting. So that was one thing. The other part was, because they had food shortages, they made it really important that I would know as close to the source as how you want to be eating. So we didn't have canned foods. We never went to McDonald's. We cooked everything from scratch. I made salad every single day from the time I was really little. So there was a success story because they had come and seen that they had the opportunity to do all that. So I'm sure many people do that. And then one little final piece was my grandmother, and when we would go to Germany, everybody had their main meal in the middle of the day, not late at night, and my grandmother would have a piece of rye bread, and we never had white bread growing up. I was the only kid with liverwurst and rye for lunches at school, But anyway, my grandmother, she would bake a big goose and would save the goose fat, and that was her little piece of something at night. So those are the things I was exposed to that I have been able to, carry on with my family. So
that's such a good idea. Goose fat at night to tide you over. What a nice snack. Beautiful, beautiful. All righty. To prevent chronic inflammation, water. You need clean water. You need unfluoridated water, unfluorinated water, guys. Lacto-fermented vegetables and foods, saturated animal fats, and from animals that were on pasture. No poisons, no soy, no bad stuff. Saturated vegetable fats are good too. These are kind where you press the nut and oil comes out, cold pressed. Cold pressed monounsat fats and olive oil, peanut oil. Some of these oils would fall under that category. But if you want to cook in saturated fats. Pastured eggs, oysters, liver, meat and bones, bone broth, master tonic. I'm hoping everyone has a master tonic. And fats are sacred, and I won't belabor the point that fats are sacred, but fats do so many good things for our body. And if there's one thing I'd say you eat and not exclude from your diet, and that is butter, raw butter, any raw fat you can find, cream. They're great for making your cell membrane sturdy and have integrity. Your brain is 70% fat. You need fats to metabolize all minerals and all proteins. And so fats are very, very important. And I'm going to stop at the fats and stop recording. And then we will pick this up in the next session, if that works for everyone.
I just want to say, Sushma, speaking of fat, this year's butter is amazing. Beyond amazing. It's so much more fat. There's less water in it. The ghee butter I make out of it is just, it's amazing. It's amazing. I could bathe in this stuff.
Yeah. Well, I have some bad news for you, sadly. Larry has sold his business to somebody else. So I'm
No.
not sure, yeah, I'm not sure what's gonna happen to butter next year, but we'll talk about that.
Wow,
Yeah,
that's too bad.
yeah. So thank you, everyone. I'm gonna stop recording and we'll do a couple of minutes of Q&A and then we'll meet in a
Thank
couple
you.
of weeks from now. Thanks.